Thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm going to do a little bit different maybe than some of your other speakers. I don't do research anymore. Emeritus means I don't have a real job. I'm actually retired. I'm week 3 or 4 of retirement. And so I warned that this is really a talk about some of the thoughts I have as we move forward with some of these really complex issues and some of the things that are going on at Boise State and in particular Idaho. So I want it to be a super interactive. And so make sure you take out your phones. And my Slido expert here is going to help me if it doesn't work. I've only done this one other time. But I want to make it a piece where we can work together on really thinking about what does it mean to be innovative and to do that through interdisciplinary teams. Because as you all know, it's really important that we have those interdisciplinary teams if we are going to be truly innovative. So I'm going to work my way through. And so the first thing I did when I was looking at this was I pulled up your institute's mission. And it's so exactly spot on to this notion of multidisciplinary and looking at that across not only research and education, but also external partnerships, which can be industry, it can be national labs. And so you guys are just set in a super good space for really looking at the energy lab landscape and being innovative because of this interdisciplinary approach. But what I want to explore a little bit today is what are some of our barriers to innovation and inspiration, as well as team building, because the power of the innovation is in the team. So my question to you is, how do we make the team solid? So a couple of things. So this is the test case. When I say multidisciplinary, what are 1 or 2 words that come to mind when you see that word? Oh, do I have? Okay, I think I have to go one more. I believe it's going to be interactive. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. If I go one more slide, will the words start appearing? That's what I can't remember now. Has anybody typed anything in? Yeah. Ah, thank you. So this should generate a word cloud. Yeah, when we think about multidisciplinarity, we think about collaborations. We think about interconnectivity, different disciplines. What are some of the other things that come to mind? Many industries, right? Another collaboration being there. Complex problem, coordination. And so all of these things are out of the box thinking. Diversity of thought, diversity of people and experiences, really important when we come to multidisciplinary ideas. And so you're all kind of living in this really important space, but to you, this word collaboration is overwhelmingly what makes it a special place, and the collaboration in terms of a learning environment as well as a research environment. So let's move on. And so it's a little bit, I'm going to play with some of your responses as we move forward. Hopefully we will succeed at that. So we just talked about ChatGPT. What does it say interdisciplinarity is, or multidiscipline? One problem, many lenses. So if you have one really complex problem, you're looking at it through many lenses. These problems are so complex that you need those lenses to not only be scientific and economic, but also social and political, perhaps. And one of the things I struggled with at NSF was, so I consider Infuse, so that's the, what we talked about, food, so the fuses, food, energy, water systems, as one of the really first convergent models that NSF ever really looked at. They were talking about convergence. I swear, these people, we were all like, what does that really mean? And so, because it's hard, so what did I do? I asked ChatGPT, what does that mean? And so I really like this. And I love this kind of idea of cooking, right? So multidisciplinary is, I know how to make dessert, You know how to make entrees, somebody else is gonna bring an appetizer, and we're all gonna have this meal together, right? So it's bringing all, working side by side on the same problem, and we need a lot of different people to come together. Whereas interdisciplinary is, we're gonna cook together, and you're gonna tell me I'm adding too much spice or this, and we're gonna do it together, really blending all of our expertise. So now we're really integrating our methods, our theories, and our data. And that's where you need kind of a deeper systems thinking and integration. So when we hit transdisciplinary, and this is where I kind of always got myself confused at NSF, was what is the difference between transdisciplinary and convergence? And transdisciplinary is really then bringing in experts beyond academics into industry, lived experiences, real world change. And now it's kind of like a community kitchen where everyone's deciding on the menu. Okay, this is the problem we need to solve, not that one. And we're all cooking together. Whereas convergence then is a more deliberate and intentional integration that kind of sits on top of the terms above. But you need that to really solve these high impact societal problems. So I'm just curious, when you are working on yours, are most of your teams single PI, multiple PIs with multiple distant? I think I've allowed you to respond to more than one thing. So as you might expect, considering your mission is multidisciplinary, you're working with multiple PIs and multiple disciplines as your number one focus. And so really you're working in that multidisciplinary space. Would you say it's at times even interdisciplinary, where instead of you bringing yours, you're actually working together to solve the problem and cooking together, if you will, that you cross that boundary? Do you think you hit that transdisciplinary piece too? In some of those cases? And so the context that I wanted to kind of play out now is this idea of you've got these multidisciplinary teams, perhaps they're interdisciplinary, but how does innovation really play into this context? And one of the cases I'm going to use is a Boise State, what's called Convergent Accelerator. Have you heard of Convergent Accelerators through NSF? So Boise State has one, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I want your feedback on what they're doing in their accelerator, because as was mentioned, I'm at Boise State. Boise State's College of Engineering started now probably less than 30 years ago. We're a very young institution as a university, only 50 years old as a university. So we were a community college before that. So a lot of you guys are old, right? Your institutions are, not you personally are old, your institution is old. And so you have a lot of expertise. So I also want your feedback on what these guys are doing and how that fits in. But innovation has to happen within that multidisciplinary context. And it's really user-based research. You're going to look at a solution that somebody's going to actually adopt. That's the key to innovation. And I'm going to talk about two books. The first book is by Carlson, and I don't know the second gentleman. And it's called Innovation, the 5 Disciplines for Creating What Customers Want. And I'm going to put this in this context and tell you a little bit about Carlson, who I had the opportunity to meet multiple times while I was at NSF. And he came to talk about his approach. He's a former senior scientist with SRI, which is the Stanford Research Institute. There's many things that SRI brought through the innovation stage to a product stage in many ways. And he gives those examples throughout the book. But he's really talking about, and you can see it's an older book, but he's talking about an approach for really how do we deliver an innovative product to what customers want. And what he came to NSF to talk about was, shouldn't our research really be a product about what somebody wants? And that's kind of, and especially in the engineering fields that I'm in, that how do we work that concept of innovation in? And he has a 5-step process that I'm going to work through a little bit. Important needs, like what's the need? How do you create value? What's your value creation? What's your value proposition for the research that you're going to do? Do you have somebody that really wants to do this? How do you get innovative teams? And I'm going to spin off to a second book on inspiration and innovation teams, and then organizational alignments, a little more targeted toward industry. So I'm not going to spend much time on that. So I want to start with telling you a little bit about thinking about the Boise State NSF Convergence Accelerator. And so its need, if you will, thinking about an important need, which kind of brings us to this idea of food, energy, and water. And what we did in Infuse is we know our population is growing. We know that climate change, even though maybe not climate disruptions, let's put it that way, are revealing limited resources. We have places in the West that basically have no water. So I'm from Salt Lake City. I now live in Boise, Idaho. There is no, I think we got this much snow in Salt Lake City. And that's the first snow we have gotten. The average snowfall in Salt Lake City is 60 inches. The average snowfall in Boise, Idaho is 18. That's why I live there, because I don't really like the snow. But literally, they have no snow. This is very destructive for their water supply as well as wildfires. So what happens is just the forests become so terribly dry that they just ignite, which is what happens also in California. So we know that these kind of really big changes in our drought, in our flooding, then we have other places that are flooding that have never flooded before, are really affecting things. Food and nutrition security is increasing. Nutrient demand is increasing. And basically, we are going to have to do more with less. And so I think we can convince everybody that this is an important need. So this Convergence Accelerator did step 1. What I want to do, and this kind of came, people are like, I don't understand Idaho. Idaho is not Iowa. It is Idaho. It actually gets a little confused with Iowa. It borders Oregon, Washington, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada. That's a lot of states, actually. It's a weird thing, right? You've got this big piece here, and then you've got this little tiny thing sticking up. That's the Canadian border. I forgot when I moved there, we actually do border Canada. It's only, I think, 45 miles long, but we do have a border with Canada. And what I'm fascinated about in this kind of food, water, energy mix, and what the Convergent Accelerator is doing is the Snake River Basin. And I just really want a map of the Snake River and all the other rivers of Idaho. Coming from Utah, where there's very little water, there's rivers everywhere in Idaho. And so, but the Snake River actually starts in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And it's funny to drive through because you're always like, oh, wait, there's the Snake River again. There it is again. It kind of snakes through a whole bunch of stuff, if you think about it. And so just pointing out a couple things. So Idaho Falls is here. This is Idaho National Lab is here. This is, the Pocatello is probably about right there. That's where one of our universities is located. This Twin Falls area that you see here is, this is mostly ag country. There's some hops that are here. This Twin Falls area is huge in dairy. There's a Chobani yogurt plant there. There's about 23 processing plants for various cheese and milk products. If you look at Idaho, which I had no idea when I moved there, what would you guess in terms of dairy, in terms of national production? What would you guess? Top 10? Top?
I know now because of the conversation yesterday. I was surprised.
Yeah. So we tie sometimes for New York in third place. So sometimes we're third, sometimes we're fourth, sometimes they're third. But California and Wisconsin are 1 and 2, and we're next for dairy. And that is a full range of products. So it's yogurt, it's milk, it's whey, it's powdered stuff. So there's a whole bunch of really innovative things that are going on right here. As you come up, this is Boise. And then as you come near the Oregon border, there's more, I think this might be beans, and there's more hops on this side. And then as it kind of crosses the border up here, this is actually really cool, this Hell's Canyon area, it's beautiful. But in this Lewiston area, right up in here is University of Idaho. And what you'll see here is lentils, a couple of other things up in here. So it's a very agriculturally based state. The total population is about 1.2 million people. The thing about the Snake River is it also is dammed. I think about more than maybe 60 to 70% of our energy generation, and it could be higher, comes from hydropower. And these are old dams that are all along the Snake River. And there's a whole controversy about that because there's also salmon fishing and how does that affect the salmon and da-da-da-da. But Idaho Power owns a lot of dams in this area. And so you kind of have this food, energy, water mix right in this place. And what I was commenting on earlier is having done some camping in some of the areas that are located right in here. There's a huge aquifer right in here, and it's built in a volcanic kind of rock system. And in certain places in this area, you'll see waterfalls, and there's water just pouring out. It's not, the basis of that is not a river. The basis is the rock, and the water's in this aquifer that's porous. And so it's just like this waterfall starting from the middle of nowhere. It's really weird. And it's like got a lot of water in it. And so there's these really interesting recharge questions. There's cloud seeding all in this area because Idaho Power does that for power. And so this group is concentrating on the dairy industry. And the reason for that is, again, going back to important needs. Are you making a difference to your customers, either internally and externally? These are the questions. Is it aligned with the organizational goals? And are you willing to commit to it? And so this group's been working in this area, specifically Dr. Owen McDougal, for a long time. In fact, he's had a workforce development grant in this area. And what they're looking at is kind of this idea of there's a growing production. There's a lot of nutrients in this, but there's these waste products. And so how do you take those waste products to become more nutrient resourced in terms of the product portfolio? There is really a lack of diverse experiences and expertises. And it's an older industry. I come from the power plant industry. And, you try and change a power plant that's been there for 30 years, it's literally impossible. And so a lot of these production plants are older and have a lot of inefficiencies and old equipment and a lack of new technologies. And so they've really identified this really specific need that's very important to Idaho and to that particular region, as well as industry. And that's where they sit in kind of this innovation cluster in this really unique watershed that, again, really fascinates me. So if you go to step 2 for the value proposition, what Dr. Carlson says is it's this kind of NABC thing. And so we started walking around in SF going, we need NABC in our proposals. where the N is the need, and I've already talked about that in a large scale. There's the approach, and then there's benefits versus cost and competition and alternatives. And if you think about writing a proposal, I'll just speak for myself, right? I'm going to tell you how many experiments I'm going to do, what are those experiments, and why they're so important to me, right? So a lot of times we really focus on our approach. And that's what we would see at NSF. People are focusing on the approach. And really what you need to do if you're going to solve these complex problems is look at what are those needs, as I've just discussed, as well as what is the competition and the alternatives. Why are we even doing this? What difference does it make? And that's kind of the engineering's perspective as well. And so the NABC, for me, became really important in terms of my own work and thinking about what I do. So the next question is, in thinking about your own work, do you think you're focused on need, approach, benefits, competition, equal between two of them, balance between all four? How do you feel about what work you're doing today? You guys are much better than me sometimes. So equal maybe between two. Which two would it be if you answered that one?
Need and approach. Need and approach.
Need and
Approach.
approach. Need and approach. Yeah, okay. Really, not very many people really looking at competition and those kind of things, although that might appear in some of these other ways. And so really, in terms of where this Convergence Accelerator is moving forward, it's really trying to look at benefits. I would say it's not so much competition, honestly, because of the work that they're doing. It's more of looking at an industry that's pretty old and trying to understand how to make it better in this kind of dairy industry focus that they have. The problem with a value proposition, and this is really hard for some engineers, is you really don't want to do just one. You want to do a lot of them and write one down, get feedback, get more ideas, synthesize and revise and repeat. And so I'm going to stop there because what we were talking about in the meeting before is, can we just do an ABC and put it in ChatGPT? And then it'll all work out for us and we'll have my whole proposal written and I can move on, right? I think the limit, and you can correct me, for me, is this idea that we're going to get a whole bunch of them. So we're not just going to go, oh, here it is, here's the answer, I'm going to move forward. And that's the idea of the multidisciplinary team, that you're gathering, you tell me you're going to do, your need is this, and this is your approach, and this is why you think this. And you come from maybe an ag side, I come from a chemical engineering side, and I think something completely different. And so we have to kind of bounce all of those approaches and things for that value proposition of the work that we're going to do. So are there any thoughts or questions? I don't, like I said, I'm trying not to be a talking head, but I thought it was so interesting that when somebody asked, well, can't we just throw this into ChatGPT and it'll come out okay? And I was like, I don't know, I got to think about it. And then I remembered it really takes the iteration step. How many people feel like that we actually do that? I don't ever feel like I have enough time. I'm like writing this proposal and it's due like in a month, right? And I'm sometimes not even giving it that time. This takes time, right? And we're one step ahead. Any thoughts on that or comments? I think you kind of answered, I have a need, I have an approach, I'm going forward. I don't need to iterate, right? So I think that's, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would just comment, not all of the federal agencies think this way.
No.
Especially if you think about cost benefit and parts of DOE, DOD. That's nice if it happens, but that's not a major consideration.
I think that's a really important layer that's not covered here, right? This is a company focus. So a company may be focused on this. Sometimes we're forced into a need or approach based on what an agency is looking at. And some of the federal agencies, as we know, have changing agendas. And so sometimes it's really hard to continue to focus on one agenda as a researcher, right? It's like Infuse lasted 7 years or whatever it was. I don't know if anybody knows, but before, I'm almost certain this was it. It was just when I got there. So I got there in 2013, 2014 time period. Before Infuse, there was SEAS. I think it was called SEAS. Do not ask me what that stands for. I do not remember. Sustainability was the S. That's all I remember. And they knew SEAS was going to move. SEAS was going to kind of go away. It was their 5-year initiatives. That's it. That's all we're doing. And then we're moving on to something else. So even at NSF, and what bubbled up from this approach was my program directors came to me and said, we want to do this Nexus work. We want to fund it. So we worked, and I'll talk a little bit about it to give you an example. We worked to put these ideas forward, and there was a lot of, why are we doing this? I promote Kargankar. Oh my God. Well, don't we know all this already? What's your need? Why are you doing? So he asked me and my colleagues all these questions as we were putting it forth, but I didn't have kind of the thought process around this when I was doing it. I wish I had. I would have been better prepared for so many meetings with him.
You know, with the transdisciplinarity, this repeat becomes critical because, I mean, if all of us are ag and bioengineers, we're trained in the same way and we don't iterate much.
Right.
But with so many disciplines, this repeat is very critical because we're not going to communicate effectively the first round. And we're going to go back and refine so that whatever final product represents all of us.
Yeah.
So it's more important in this.
It is. And to give you an idea, so what we did in the whole, I think I can tell, it's over so I can disclose hidden things. But so the first round was, does the community even care about this? So we did about a bunch of Dear Colleague letters in our core programs. And so chemistry had a Dear Colleague letter and environmental engineering had one. And so we had individual projects on these. And that was going pretty well. And then we were like, okay, we're going to do a couple big ones. Then we decided to, like, 2 PIs, see what happens there. Then we decided to write a really big solicitation, which are their larger grants. Do you know how long that took to write that solicitation? I'd say 1.5 years. Because of this path. Do you know the word efficiency means something different to a social scientist? I am sorry if I kept using that word. He told me that 5 times. I'm like, I don't know what the word you want me to use is. Help me here, right? And the ordering of what was going to be covered. All of these things became extremely important when bringing this team across NSF together. So it was an interesting process, exactly to your point. But it took, I would say, 2 years to write. Well, 1.5 years, and then to move it through 2 years to write the solicitation. Just the solicitation, yes.
So this is not a nice question, but I'll ask it
Go
anyway.
for it.
At what point in this discussion did the various components of this program start thinking about their budgets and how I was going to get?
I will answer that, yes.
Very early on, I think.
Were you there?
I was on the Chemical Sciences Roundtable when you presented before Infuse was final.
I remember that presentation, okay. At one point, I would say nobody talked about it. until we put the money on the table and somebody went, you mean some of our money went to that social scientist? Are you kidding? I looked at them and went, are you kidding me? That was the idea. And what happened to the best of my understanding, because I left, is each directorate then had to take money aside and put it into a transdisciplinary fund, which I think started to ping off of these TIG things and all of that. Because there was literally somebody said to me, so our part of our $5 million went to social sciences. And I'm like, yeah, that's the idea of it. It was pooled money, but it mentally wasn't pooled money.
Yeah.
The really interesting part about it, the reviews, the first round of reviews, because now we had a really complex team of people. The social scientist is like, this is not good social science. And so then there were these arguments of, and I have to stop for a second because I always get it wrong. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And to get a reviewer to think in that way, is the whole greater than the sum of the different pieces of the interdisciplinary group? So your social science, maybe it's the best. Your engineering, not great. But when you combine the two, is the whole the best? The reviews were very difficult. I think we reviewed some that were like fair, or we awarded some that were fair because the reviewers just couldn't get their head around it either. So one of the things that I'll throw out there for my friend Angela, and we did a little bit talk of AI, is she has tried to do this proposition within the development of AI, and this is her company. And again, I threw this in here before our discussion with AI, and she has some models. They're basically not the complex transdisciplinary ones that we've been talking about, but really looking at adaptive coaching with different questioning like we talked about, and developing AI so that a raw idea becomes a value proposition. And so I think that's fine. And you'll see here that this is, she's got kind of this unique value proposition. And she has some examples. I think I may have taken that slide out, but like if you had a career award, if you were doing a career award, that this might be a technique that you'd want to do. But I think in answer to the thought process just of an hour ago, that value proposition for a very complex thing really needs a more iterative process than this. So that is a way that you can also approach. So we've gone step 1, step 2, now we need a champion. So we've got champions in the room, right? Somebody who has the partners that we need, somebody who's going to organize this thing, get the trust, have enthusiasm, listen and learn, fail, and then reboot and ask for ideas and has all that. And you're going to end up with terrific colleagues and you're going to help others reach their potential. So we've got a good person in the lead, and I'm going to go back to my friend Owen, and he's the lead. And some of these qualities he's okay with. I love him, don't get me wrong. He's great. He's a good guy. Some of these he has a little trouble with, listening and all of that. And so, but he's the champion. And I think some of his skills have not helped the team. And so I think the next important part, you got your value proposition, is the team. Because we know that collective intelligence is what we need. It's multidisciplinary. We've talked about all this. And it's not so much, according to Carlson, the quality it's the quality of the idea, not the hierarchy of roles. And that sometimes becomes really difficult. So that means just because I'm your advisor doesn't mean I know everything. And sometimes that gets us in trouble. And then trust the process and trust the relationships. And I'm going to go through a couple more slides and come back to trust the relationships.
Can you elaborate on the quality of the idea? With this diversity of the teams, we cannot converge on.
Yeah, I think what it means is I think what that comment means is you're in charge of the project, you're the champion. So because you're in charge, we're gonna go with your idea. That's the hierarchy of your role versus mine. I'm your student or I'm your colleague. So I'm going with the hierarchy of the role in terms of the idea and the team, not the quality of the actual idea. Right? So what that means is you kind of forego a leadership role for the idea, but you're still the leader. Does that make sense?
It does, but because of we look at the different views, there's a subjectivity of what
There
idea
is.
is better. than
There
others.
is. And that's the part of the team that you have to kind of work on. And that is back to my friends. So they have 3 areas they're looking at. They're looking at a chemometric software. The computer scientist has done this in the part with potatoes and like certain qualities of potatoes and how they fry, right? Idaho, when I say Idaho, what do you think? Potatoes, right? Not dairy. So this group's done a lot in potatoes. I'm going to focus a little bit on pulsed electric field, which is a way to dry food products, milk products, as well as potatoes. And then extrusion has, it's a pretty new area for them. And they're looking at a lot of these waste products and how do you pellet something, put something into a pellet and all of that. So I wanted to focus on pulsed electric field, which is basically an instrument that a company has, and they've done a lot of work on it. And so the idea is that we want to increase our products, we want to increase efficiency, and we want to reduce waste in this team. This is the team. And so Owen McDougal is in chemistry. He's a chemist. My colleague Tim Andersen is the co-PI. He's in computer science. And then they have some people from Utah State, a food engineer, and microbiology. And so this is their team. What are your thoughts?
No social science.
Social science.
Because they're focused solely on the product or the widget. They're widget focused. I also don't see, and this is my thing, I'm a chemical engineer. If I put the widget into my process line, am I actually going to increase product, increase efficiency, and reduce waste? I don't see a systems level person here in terms of what they're doing. And I don't know if they're depending on industry for that. I think that's another piece. I don't see the integrative person. So I have this thing that's doing drying potatoes really nice, but how does, or, doing some product with milk, but how does that fit into the process? So to me, they're not doing a really good systems piece. And I've had that conversation with them. That's why.
It was a convincing concept. I see.
It was, because they won, right? But it turns out in interviewing them, these Convergence accelerators are focused on product. Industry, use inspired. Industry is telling you to do this, you make widget, it moves on, which I didn't know. And so it's an interesting, because they won, right? So it's very different than this idea of nexus or systems approaching. So their team is a little challenging at times, I think, because they're focusing on that. And just a little bit about pulsed electric field. It really helps in terms of, again, this value proposition of increasing capacity because it decreases the drying time. And as you know, drying time is very energy intensive for the product, and therefore product quality increases, and scorch has something to do with probably potatoes again. So they are looking at this in the potato industry. And that is just really, Owen's work does a lot of fundamental chemistry, but again, I don't think there's a process. And so if I put this widget into my product line, what is that really going to do? So they have this team And they're making these things. And then I go to the next book that I wanted to talk about. And Ed Catmull is somebody I met when I was at Utah. He is the co-founder of Pixar. And so he wrote a book called Creativity, Inc. It has one of the Toy Story figures on it. I can't remember which one now. Overcoming the unseen forces that stand in the way of inspiration. And I really like these ideas that he has that emerge in the world of creativity. The story is king. The idea is king. We stick with the idea. We have to trust our process. And getting the right people and the right chemistry is actually more important than getting the right idea. And one of the problems with the Convergence Accelerator is they do like a pitch and they learn about pitch and they have one little thing on team science, like an hour on team science. Do I have any team science experts in the room? Right? Like these people are having trouble working together. And so, and when you think of a movie, it's a big problem there's a lot of different people. And so that working together and trusting the process. So just a couple of points. Multidisciplinary or team, what were the best parts of it for you? Thinking about a good team. Oops, sorry. Ooh, did anybody put in anything yet? Oh, there we go. Okay. Collaboration, learning other perspectives, right? There's a lot of value to having this really strong team. Exchange of ideas, multiple ideas. Jargon is tough, right? Like the word efficiency means something different to somebody, and I don't like that word. And I'm like, I like the word efficiency. It helps me as an engineer. I honestly do not remember why Bob did not like this word, but he did not like it. There was a lot of fighting in the room writing this thing, by the way. Yeah, diversity. So the next one, of course, is what are your challenges? Yeah, communication. Communication is tough. Cohesion, different language. Yeah, lost focus. Each view. And that's why we had another group do what's called a COBRI. It's for universities that don't get much NIH money. And they were doing an engineering chemistry thing on medical devices. And there is a guy at Boise State that's a team scientist. And I was like, just put this guy in your proposal, please, because you two are going to be talking two completely different languages. Your jargon is completely different. I don't know how many people, like in mechanical engineering versus chemical engineering, when you put like heat transfer equations together, you use different variables, like different X is one thing to a chemi, X is a different thing to an ME. We can't even agree on what we're going to do there, let alone what words we're going to use for everything. And so these things become really big challenges. And I think the other challenge is somebody's going to screw up and make a mistake. And then are you ticked off at the person? Or have you really got that trust relationship with each other? And remember I said, and food, energy, and water, we had a whole bunch of ones we did individually. And then we did some workshops, and then we awarded these big grants. And the very first meeting that we had with all these awardees, they came together, and one of my AAAS fellows was like, oh my gosh, the people don't even know each other. They just shoved, hey, JoAnn, I noticed from your video, you're pretty good at this. Will you be on my proposal? Sure. And then we met at this PI meeting. Isn't that cool? But the groups that had workshops and were awarded large convergent grants had come out of the workshop working together. They trusted each other. They knew the process, and they put together a really strong team. And I said, which ones are single investigators or 1 or 2 investigators, and which ones are the really big infused ones? And did they have workshops? And we almost, that first round, almost all of them, a very high percentage of what was awarded had attended the same workshop together and had been able to start dealing with failure and understanding each other. So I'll tell you one Toy Story problem. And I told my friend who said, you've got too many slides, and I do. So there's a rule at Pixar. You cannot take the script or the animation home. You can't like put it on a drive and take it home. And so they don't do that. Well, somebody was going on maternity leave and decided to download it on a drive and just kind of work a little bit. And so that kind of was not supposed to be good. And every night they back up the drive. But the backup button is next to the delete button. So one night they had delete, not backup. So maternity lady comes out and says, but I have a backup. And so this idea of she did something she was not supposed to do. Guy like hits the wrong freaking button. They changed that almost immediately. So this huge potential failure of people doing the wrong thing turned out to be like, oh my God, thank you so much. I am so glad you backed this up, right? In an external way. And so that idea that we just have to admit failure, we have to deal with a fearless culture. I think we all have this thing, I'll just speak for myself. Sometimes it's like, I don't want to fail in front of my colleagues. I want to, I don't trust that process enough sometimes, but you really do have to trust that process. There is like 5 pages of things that Ed points out. Get the team right, you'll get the chances are they'll get the idea right. My best as a dean even was always hire people who are smarter than you. That's going to get you the best product. And I'm not smart at everything. I'm pretty broad, not very deep. And, try not to be, I have trouble with that one a couple of times, the you are right one. The truth in the hallways means people behind your back talking about stuff, and then to your face, no, it's great. I love it. It's really good. Oh my God, she's such an idiot. I can't believe it. So you try really hard as a leader not to do that. And then the trust part. And the trust part, I'm going to give you a personal thought process there. So I was at the University of Utah for 29 years before I moved to Boise State. It was the most difficult thing I had ever done. And I do get kind of, because I would be like, okay, everybody, let's do this and this and this. And they'd all be like, what's she doing? Why is she doing this? She doesn't like us. She's going to take all our money away. And I would just get so upset. And the thing is I had been at Utah so long and I had grown up there as a student. They trusted me. They knew my intention. And what I had to do at Boise State, which I probably would in hindsight start differently, and thinking this through at the back end versus the front end, is I would have given more into the trust process, because some of the things I was trying to do, I was doing too fast and I hadn't gained their trust yet. And so I think the trust thing is really big for me. And then going back to that communication structure shouldn't be, and Ed talks a lot about Steve Jobs did not sit in the room when they were discussing scripts because he could not handle people telling him they didn't like his idea. And so then that would shut everything down. And he was that personality. So they wouldn't let him sit in there just so that they could have that creative process go underway. What are some barriers that you think you have faced? And I think we're almost at the end. I usually have a little thing and now I'm getting worried, so I. Yeah, the communication thing is just hard. Time. Yeah, all of this takes super, like I said, if I had taken the time to build the trust, so many things I was trying to do would have gone so much better. And so I caused a lot of anxiety for myself. Yeah, incentives. I don't know if somebody wants to share a little bit more about, meaning, is there any incentive to go through this process, or what am I going to get out of it? That kind of thing. Yeah, egos. Yeah. And academics are good at that, right? We're good at egos, that's for sure. Hierarchy. Great. I think these are really big things that I think I'm going to take back to that group that does the Convergence Accelerator, because like I said, I feel like you guys have worked a lot on these problems, and I think they're just starting. And there's a lot of lack of cohesion sometimes. I can feel it in that group, just even because I was a department chair, and it was like, what budget is going what way? And so some of these things, and just sharing with them that these are other challenges that groups face. And so thank you for participating. So just to wrap up, the last one is really organizational alignment. And that's more along the lines of industry. But in terms of doing that, it can happen anywhere. And you're going to have barriers in terms of resources. But what Kurt ends with is the most valuable resource that you have is the team and the colleagues that you have. And so I'll end there. Thank you for participating in my Slido. Thank you for making sure I wasn't nervous, because I knew I had an expert in the room. And any comments or questions?